The message arrived as I was signing a $15 million contract. Leo, don't come for Christmas this year. Brad thinks you create a tense atmosphere. It's better if you don't show up. For a second, I thought it was a prank. My mother, the same woman who called me every Sunday to ask if I was eating right, was uninviting me from family Christmas because my 3-month brother-in-law had decided I was a problem. If only she knew who I really was. I put my phone down, looked at my executive assistant, and said calmly, reschedule the 5 o'clock meeting for tomorrow. Because here's the thing about me, when people try to push me out, I don't yell or argue. I take action. My name is Leo Richardson, 32 years old, Vice President of Strategic Development at Hudson Investment Group. At 32, I am the youngest executive in the company's history to manage an investment portfolio worth over $800 million. But my family has no idea what I really do. They think I work in business or sales. I always changed the subject when they asked. I stopped trying to explain my life years ago when I realized they preferred the simple version of me. My sister Jessica was always the golden star, the perfect daughter who made choices mom understood. She married the right guy, at the right age, with the right profession. I was the younger brother who worked hard, but never seemed to have anything concrete to show for it. And now Brad, her husband, an insurance salesman who thought he was the Wolf of Wall Street for having sold 2 corporate policies last month, decided that I created tension at family gatherings. The irony almost made me laugh. The man who boasted about getting a huge promotion, which was actually moving from junior salesman to full salesman, was judging me unfit to sit at the Christmas table. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't angry. I was tired. My life was too big, too complex to waste energy convincing people who didn't want to understand me. I stayed in the office until midnight, finalized the quarterly projections, approved 3 acquisition proposals, and reviewed the report for our expansion into the Asian market. I love what I do. It's the only place where I feel completely in control. At midnight, I walked through the empty lobby, my footsteps echoing on the Italian marble, and felt only clarity. If Brad didn't want me at Christmas, fine. He just didn't expect me to have a whole world outside our family. A world that was infinitely bigger than his. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 7 a.m., as usual. Phones ringing, emails coming in waves, architects asking for final approvals for the residential development project we would be launching next year. My assistant, Kevin, handed me a stack of documents. Leo, the Manhattan project consultant, is running late, but he said. Kevin stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened. When I turned around, I almost laughed out loud. Brad was standing in my office doorway, red-faced, sweating, completely shocked. He walked in as if someone had pushed him, his eyes darting between me and the giant Hudson Investment Group logo on the wall behind my desk. "What the hell is this?" he stammered. I leaned back in my leather chair, completely calm, while he looked like he had just seen a ghost. He probably came here thinking he would intimidate or humiliate me. Instead, he discovered where I really work. Who I really am. "Good morning, Brad," I said casually. You work here," he shouted, his voice failing. "What are you? Are you the boss?" I raised an eyebrow. "I oversee 3 investment divisions. So yes, I guess that makes me the boss. Why are you here?" If you're enjoying this family twist story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how this situation was just beginning. Because Brad had just walked into the office of the person he had underestimated. And what was about to happen would change everything forever. He looked like a fish out of water, breathing rapidly, trying to process what he was seeing. The same man who had spent the last month treating me like a failure was now in my territory, surrounded by symbols of a success he never imagined I possessed. "Leo, Brad began, but his voice faltered. His eyes scanned the office again, the floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic views of Manhattan, the mahogany desk that cost more than his car, the walls covered with investment certificates and photos of me with mayors and CEOs. "You what, Brad?" I asked, keeping my tone casual as he clearly panicked. "I didn't know you were this," he gestured vaguely around him. "Jessica said you worked in sales or something." The irony hit me like a punch. Jessica, my own sister, had reduced me to sales or something, because it was simpler than explaining that her brother managed investments that moved more money in a day than Brad saw in an entire year. "And because of that misinformation, you decided I wasn't suitable to sit at the Christmas table?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. Brad tried to regain his composure, straightening his shoulders. Look, Leo, that was a misunderstanding. I just told your mom that it might be better to keep the family atmosphere more relaxed this year. Relaxed, I repeated. Interesting choice of words. Kevin appeared at the door again. Leo, the folks from JP Morgan are on line 2. They want to confirm the 3 o'clock meeting. Tell them I'll confirm, I replied without taking my eyes off Brad, who paled at the mention of JP Morgan. After Kevin left, Brad attempted a forced smile. Man, that's amazing. I mean, I always knew you were smart, but this, he made another vague gesture. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? The question revealed everything about his character. It wasn't genuine admiration, it was recalculation. He was trying to reposition himself now that he knew who I really was. Because, I said slowly, I prefer people to know me for who I am, not for the position I hold. But you could have avoided so much confusion. Confusion. As if his decision to exclude me from the family was just a technical misunderstanding. Brad, tell me something, I said, leaning forward. When you told my mom that I created tension, what kind of tension were you referring to exactly? He shifted uncomfortably. You know, sometimes you get kind of distant. Like you're judging everyone. Judging how? Like, at the last family reunion, when I told you about my promotion, you didn't seem very impressed. The memory came back clearly. Brad had spent 20 minutes bragging about being promoted from junior salesman to full salesman at the insurance company where he worked. He described it as if he had just been named CEO of Goldman Sachs. I congratulated you, I said. Yeah, but it was kind of too polite. Cold. Now I understood. Brad had interpreted my diplomacy as condescension because deep down, he knew his big promotion wasn't as impressive as he made it out to be. And instead of dealing with his own insecurity, he decided the problem was my attitude. So you chose to remove me from the equation, I said. It wasn't quite like that. How was it, then? Brad took a deep breath, trying to find the words. Look, Leo, Jessica gets stressed when you're around because she never knows if you approve of her choices. And your mom worries because you work too much and never bring a girlfriend home or talk about your personal life. Every word revealed how superficial his understanding of my family was. Jessica was stressed not because I judged her, but because she knew I saw through the performances. And my mom worried because I was secretive about my work. And your solution was to convince me that I was the problem, I said. I just wanted family gatherings to be lighter. Lighter for whom, Brad? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. The answer was clear, lighter for him, who didn't want to have to sustain his exaggerated stories in front of someone who might question them. My phone rang. It was Jessica. Excuse me, I said, answering it. Hi, Jess. Leo, Mom said Brad came looking for you. Are you guys talking? Her voice carried a cautious hope. I glanced at Brad, who was trying to look casual while clearly listening to every word. We're having a clarifying conversation, I said. That's good. Maybe you two can work out all this tension. Tension. The word Brad had planted and now spread through the family like a virus. Jessica, can I ask you something? Do you really think I'm a tense person? There was a pause. You're intense sometimes. Intense how? You ask questions that make people uncomfortable. What kind of questions? Another pause. Like when you asked Brad about the details of his promotion. Brad had told her. Of course he had. He had turned my polite question about his new responsibilities into some kind of hostile interrogation. I see, I said. Well, Brad and I are talking about it now. Great. I love you, Leo. I love you too, Jess. I hung up and put the phone on the table. Brad was watching me closely. She's a good person, he said. She is, I agreed. And that's why you won't be able to keep me away from her. What are you talking about? Brad, why exactly did you come here today? He hesitated. Jessica mentioned that you knew people in the investment business. We're thinking about buying a bigger house and wanted to talk to someone about financing options. Another piece of the puzzle fell into place. He hadn't come here to make amends or resolve our supposed tension. He came because he needed my financial help. So you exclude me from family Christmas, but show up at my office when you need something. It wasn't like that. How was it then? Silence stretched between us. I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to find a way to explain that didn't make him look exactly what he was, an opportunistic manipulator. Brad, I finally said, you have 5 minutes to explain to me why I should help someone who has spent the last month convincing my family that I'm a problem. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. If you're curious to find out how this explosive family revelation will unfold, you can't miss what happens next. Because Brad was about to discover that underestimating Leo Richardson had been the biggest mistake of his life. And what came next would forever change the dynamics of that family. Leo, Brad said, trying to force a conciliatory smile, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Maybe we can forget all this nonsense and move forward as a family. The word family coming out of his mouth irritated me more than it should have. He had spent months painting me as a problem for that very family, and now he wanted to use that term as if it were a magic key to erase everything. Brad, you have 2 minutes to explain to me exactly what you need from me. He adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable. Look, Jessica and I are really interested in that house in Westchester. You know, the $450,000 one. But our real estate agent said we need a financial reference letter from someone reputable. Respectable. The irony was almost comical. The man who had questioned my suitability to sit at the Christmas table now needed my professional reputation to get a loan. And you thought I would be the right person for that? Well, yes. Jessica said you knew people in the financial sector. Once again, the information had been distorted. Jessica had turned my career as vice president of one of the largest investment firms in the country into knows people in the financial sector. Brad, listen to me carefully, I said, leaning forward. You've spent the last few months convincing my family that I'm a negative presence. And now you're here in my office, asking for a favor that's potentially worth $500,000. I know it seems strange, but... It doesn't seem strange, Brad. It is strange. Kevin appeared at the door again. Leo, your mother is on the phone. She says it's urgent. I looked at Brad, who immediately turned pale. Tell her I'll call her back in 5 minutes. After Kevin left, Brad began to speak quickly. Look, maybe your mother called because Jessica told her I was coming here. She must be worried that we're fighting or something. Are we? No. Of course not. We're family. There was that word again. But there was something about Brad's rush, the way he had turned pale when my mother called, that made me suspect there was more to the story. Brad, why exactly didn't you want me to come for Christmas? He hesitated. I already explained it to you. You sometimes create a tense atmosphere. But specifically, what kind of tension were you worried I would create? The question caught him off guard. He opened and closed his mouth a few times before saying, You ask a lot of questions. Questions about what? About everything. About work, about plans, about money. Now we were getting to the heart of the matter. And why do questions about those things bother you? Because you make it seem like I'm being judged. Or maybe you feel judged because you know you're exaggerating in your stories. Brad blushed. I don't exaggerate anything. Then tell me about this $450,000 house you're trying to buy. What about it? How are you going to pay for it? We have our savings and... How much have you saved? Brad was silent. Brad, what's your annual income? That's none of your business. It is my business if you want me to sign a financial reference letter. He shifted in his chair. I make good money. How much is good? $52,000 a year, plus commissions. I did the math quickly. With Jessica's income as a teacher and his as an insurance salesman, they were looking at a house that cost almost 4 times their combined annual income. It was financially irresponsible, and any competent financial advisor would have warned them about it. Brad, you can't afford this house. Yes, we can. The real estate agent said that with the right kind of financing. The real estate agent wants to make a sale. It's not his responsibility to make sure you don't go bankrupt. We won't go bankrupt. With a $400,000 mortgage and your combined income, you'd be spending over 70% of your income on housing. That's a recipe for financial disaster. Brad stood up abruptly. I knew it. I knew you'd do this. Do what? Make me feel small. Make me feel like I'm not good enough. And there it was. The real reason Brad didn't want me at Christmas. It wasn't because I created tension for others. It was because my presence forced him to confront the reality of his financial situation. Brad, I'm not trying to make you feel small. I'm trying to save you from a terrible decision. You don't understand. Jessica wants this house. She deserves this house. And how are you going to pay for it? We'll figure it out. That's not a plan, Brad. That's a fantasy. He began pacing back and forth, gesturing frantically. Can't you support me just once? Can't you just trust that I know what I'm doing? Based on what? Your experience with real estate investments? Your years of financial planning? Based on the fact that I'm your brother-in-law. Being my brother-in-law doesn't qualify you to make smart financial decisions. Brad stopped pacing and stared at me angrily. You know what? Jessica was right about you. Right about what? That you think you're better than everyone else. The accusation hit me harder than I expected. I don't think I'm better than anyone else. Yes, you do. You look at me, at Jessica, at all of us, as if we were stupid children who don't know how to live our own lives. I look at you as people I love who are about to make a mistake that could destroy your financial future. See? There you go again, being condescending. My phone rang. It was Jessica. Answer it, Brad said. Tell her you refuse to help us. I answered the phone. Hi, Jess. Leo, Mom said you and Brad are at odds. What's going on? I looked at Brad, who was staring at me defiantly. Jessica, Brad is here in my office asking me to sign a financial reference for a mortgage. Yes, for our new house. Isn't it exciting? Jess, can you afford a $450,000 house? There was a pause. Leo, why do you always ask these kinds of questions? Because I care about you. It doesn't seem like you care. It seems like you're questioning our ability to make adult decisions. Brad was shaking his head, whispering I told you so under his breath. Jessica, what is your combined annual income? Leo, that's kind of invasive. It's a basic question about financial planning. Why does it matter? We want the house, we can get the financing, and we just need someone to attest that you know us. I'm not going to attest to something that I know will hurt you financially. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Jess. Leo, she said finally, her voice cold, sometimes you have to trust that people know what's best for themselves. Even when I know they don't. Especially then. Brad was smiling now, realizing that Jessica was on his side. Jess, if I sign that reference and you default on your mortgage, it affects my professional reputation too. So it's about you. No, it's about. Leo, if you don't want to help us, just say so. Don't make up excuses about our financial stability. And then she hung up. Brad was practically beaming. See? Even your own sister knows you're being ridiculous. I stared at him for a long moment. Here was a man who had excluded me from the family for months, who now wanted my help with a disastrous financial decision, and who had just used my own sister against me. Brad, I said calmly, you have 5 seconds to get out of my office. What? 5. Leo, let's talk about this like adults. 4. You can't be serious. 3. Brad realized I was serious. Fine, fine. But when your family finds out what you're really like, don't blame me. 2. He rushed to the door but stopped before leaving. They will find out, Leo. They will find out that you care more about money than family. 1. He left, slamming the door. I sat in my chair, trying to process what had just happened. In less than an hour, I had lost both my brother-in-law and my sister. And the worst part? They were convinced that I was the villain in the story. Kevin appeared cautiously. Is everything okay? Yes, I said. Cancel my afternoon appointments. Something wrong. Nothing that can't be fixed. Because Brad had made a fatal mistake. He thought he could use me and then discard me. He thought he could manipulate my family against me and there would be no consequences. He was about to find out how deeply he had underestimated Leo Richardson. And when he did, it would be too late to turn back. That night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment overlooking Central Park, a glass of wine in my hand and a crystal-clear decision in my mind. Brad had made 3 fatal mistakes. First, underestimating who I was. Second, trying to use me when he needed help. Third, turning my own family against me. Mistakes that cost dearly in the business world. And they cost even more in your personal life. I called Kevin. I need you to do some discreet research for me. Sure, Leo. What's it about? Brad Morrison. I want to know everything. Credit history, previous jobs, references, performance at his current company. Everything you can find. Kevin hesitated. This isn't about the financial reference he asked for, is it? It's about protecting my family, I replied. And that protection starts with information. 3 days later, Kevin walked into my office with a thick folder and a worried expression. Leo, you need to see this. I opened the file and began to read. Brad Morrison had worked at 4 different companies in the last 5 years. He had been fired from 2 for performance issues. At his current company, he had been on probation for 6 months, information he conveniently omitted when he bragged about his promotion. But what really caught my attention was something else. Brad had applied for 7 different loans in the last 2 years. All denied. His credit score was plummeting, and he had credit card debt of nearly $30,000. Kevin, I said slowly, he's not trying to buy a new house. He's trying to escape a desperate financial situation. And using Jessica as collateral. Exactly. My cell phone rang. It was my mother. Leo, honey, I need to talk to you. Sure, Mom. What about? About Brad. He said you had a difficult conversation, but that you refused to help them with the house because you don't approve of Jessica. I closed my eyes. Of course he had twisted the story. Mom, that's not true. He said you questioned his ability to support his family. I questioned the financial wisdom of buying a house that costs 4 times their annual income. Leo, sometimes you have to have faith in people. And sometimes you have to protect people from their own bad decisions. There was a long silence. Jessica is hurt. She thinks you don't trust her. I trust her. I don't trust him. Why not? I looked at the open file on my desk. Because I have information that you and Jessica don't have. What kind of information? The kind that shows Brad isn't being honest about his financial situation. My mother sighed. Leo, please don't create unnecessary problems. They seem happy. Mom, if I prove to you that Brad is hiding significant debts from Jessica, would you listen to me? I don't want you investigating my son-in-law, Leo. Even if it's to protect Jessica? Jessica is an adult. She can make her own decisions. After I hung up, I realized that Brad had played a smart card. He had gotten to my family first, controlled the narrative, and painted me as the controlling brother who couldn't accept Jessica's choices. But he made a mistake. He underestimated my patience and my ability to plan strategically. I called Marcus Thompson, my personal attorney. Marcus, I need some advice. Not legal, ethical. Go ahead. If I knew someone was about to make a catastrophic financial decision based on false information provided by someone else, what would be my moral responsibility? To inform the person of the facts. What if that person refused to listen? Then you would document your attempt to warn them and let them bear the consequences of their choices. What if there was a third option? A way to expose the truth in a way that the person couldn't ignore. Marcus laughed. Leo, are you planning something elaborate? I'm planning to protect my sister. As long as it's legal and ethical, you have my blessing. And my curiosity. That night, I called a private investigator the company occasionally used for due diligence on acquisitions. Rebecca, I need a full background check. Not for business, for family. Understood. Name. Brad Morrison. Deadline. 1 week. While waiting for the results, I began to observe Brad more closely. His social media posts showed a man desperately trying to maintain an image of success. Photos in expensive restaurants, check-ins at luxury hotels, always with comments about celebrating another big sale or living the dream. But the dates didn't add up. In the weeks he posted about big sales, records from the company where he worked showed mediocre sales for the entire team. If you're following this story of family manipulation and want to find out how the truth always comes out, subscribe to the channel because what comes next will show you why you should never underestimate someone who really knows the game. Rebecca called me a week later. Leo, you're going to want to sit down for this. That bad. Worse. Brad Morrison has a history of relationships with financially stable women. 3 broken engagements in the last 8 years, always after the women discovered his debts. My stomach clenched. Go on. 2 of them filed complaints with the police for attempted financial fraud. One discovered he had applied for credit cards using her name. Another discovered he had used her personal information to secure a loan. And Jessica doesn't know any of this. Apparently not. But there's more. He legally changed his name 5 years ago. His previous name was Bradley Hutchinson. That was it. The missing piece. Brad wasn't just a man with financial problems trying to use my sister. He was a financial predator with a pattern of behavior. I hung up the phone and looked out my office window. The city stretched out before me, full of honest people trying to build decent lives. And there was a man who had chosen to parasitize the work and trust of others. Not anymore. I called Kevin. Cancel my appointments for tomorrow. I have a family visit to make. To Jessica? To Jessica. And this time, Brad Morrison is going to find out that messing with the wrong family has consequences that go far beyond a simple loan denial. Because the game had changed completely. And I was about to show Brad that when you try to manipulate Leo Richardson, you're not just dealing with a protective brother. You're dealing with someone who knows exactly how to destroy the life of anyone who threatens the people he loves. The next morning, I drove to Jessica's house with a folder of documents on the passenger seat and absolute clarity about what I needed to do. It was no longer about protecting my reputation or proving I was right. It was about saving my sister before it was too late. I rang the doorbell at 9 in the morning. Jessica opened the door still in her bathrobe, surprised to see me. Leo? What are you doing here? I need to talk to you and Brad. Both of you together. He's still sleeping. Wake him up. Something in my tone made Jessica stop questioning. She let me in and went to call Brad. I heard whispered voices coming from the bedroom, then heavy footsteps coming down the stairs. Brad appeared in shorts and a t-shirt, his hair messy, his eyes puffy. When he saw me sitting at the kitchen table with an open briefcase, his expression changed instantly. "What's this?" he asked, but his voice already carried fear. "Sit down," I said calmly. "Both of you." Jessica sat down next to me, confused. Brad hesitated before sitting down in the chair opposite me, as if he were being interrogated. I opened the folder and placed the first document on the table. Brad Morrison, also known as Bradley Hutchinson until 2017. The blood drained from his face. Jessica looked from the paper to Brad, confusion turning to alarm. "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means your husband legally changed his name 5 years ago," I replied, placing another document on the table. "After 2 ex-fiancés filed complaints with the police for attempted financial fraud." "That's not true," Brad shouted, standing up abruptly. "Sit down," I said, without raising my voice. Something in my calmness made him obey. "Sarah Mitchell, fiancée from 2014 to 2016. She discovered that you had opened 3 credit cards using her personal information." I placed a photo on the table. Brad at a wedding, embracing a smiling redhead. Amanda Rodriguez, fiancée from 2017 to 2018. She reported you for using her bank details to secure a personal loan of $25,000. Another photo. Brad with a brunette, in an elegant restaurant. Jessica was completely silent, her eyes fixed on the images. "And Lisa Chun," I continued, fiancée from 2019 to 2020. She ended the engagement when she discovered you had created fake accounts in her name to hide your debts. The third photo showed Brad with an Asian woman on a beach. "Stop," Brad whispered. "Stop this." "I'm not done yet," I said, pulling more documents from the folder. "Your current job. You weren't promoted, Brad. You've been on probation for 6 months for poor performance. Your supervisor, Margaret Walsh, has documented 16 customer complaints about questionable sales practices. Jessica finally found her voice. Brad, is this true? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried to speak, couldn't. Your current debts, I continued relentlessly, total $57,000 in credit cards, personal loans, and car financing. Your credit score is 422. You've been denied for 7 different loans in the last 2 years. Brad was shaking now. Jessica, I can explain. I'm not done yet, I interrupted. The house you want to buy. You've already signed preliminary documents using Jessica as the primary guarantor, knowing she was unaware of your debts. I placed the last document on the table. A contract signed by Brad, using Jessica's name as a co-signer without her consent. Jessica picked up the paper with trembling hands. My signature. That's not my signature. Because Brad forged it, I said. Just as he forged information about family income and financial status. The silence that followed was devastating. Jessica looked at Brad as if she were seeing a stranger. How many? She whispered. How many what? Brad asked, his voice cracking. How many women have you done this to? Brad didn't answer. Answer her, I said. 7, Brad murmured. Over 10 years. Jessica slowly rose from her chair. 7 women. 10 years. And I'm number 8. It's not like that, baby. With you it's different. I love you. You love me. Jessica laughed, a sound devoid of humor. You forged my signature on legal documents. Brad looked at me with pure hatred. You planned this. You want to destroy my marriage. Your marriage destroyed itself, I replied. I just documented the destruction. Jessica, don't listen to him. He always thought you were stupid. He always thought you didn't deserve to have your own opinion. Jessica turned to me, her eyes shining. Is that true? Did you always think that? For a moment, I considered lying. It would be easier. More diplomatic. But Jessica deserved the whole truth. I always thought you were too smart to be manipulated, I said. And I always hoped you would realize when someone was trying to use you. Then why didn't you tell me before? Because you wouldn't have believed me. You would have thought I was being the controlling brother Brad said I was. Jessica looked at Brad, then at me, then at the documents scattered on the table. Get out of my house, she said to Brad. Jessica. Get out of my house. Brad stood up, desperate. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Go to any of your other 7 victims. See if any of them will take you back. You can't kick me out. My name is on the lease. Jessica smiled for the first time since I had arrived. Actually, it's not. The lease is only in my name. Another thing you assumed wrong. Brad looked at me as if I were the devil. You won. Are you happy now? Brad, I said, standing up, you tried to push me away from my family so you could manipulate them without interference. You tried to use me when you needed financial help. And you spent months convincing everyone that I was the problem. I walked up to him, close enough so he could see the absolute determination in my eyes. I didn't win anything. You lost. Because of your own choices. Because of your own actions. Because of your own greed. Brad stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Through the window, we watched him stuff clothes into a suitcase and drive away. Jessica turned to me, tears streaming down her face. How did you find out all this? Because when someone tries to take me away from my family, I investigate why. She hugged me tightly, sobbing on my shoulder. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for believing him. There's nothing to be sorry for, I said, returning the hug. You were in love. He took advantage of that. When Jessica finally stopped crying, she pulled away and looked me in the eyes. Leo, what do you really do for a living? I smiled. I protect investments. And I protect family. Turns out, the skills are pretty similar. Will you help me cancel all those documents he signed? Jess, I said, you have the best corporate lawyer in Manhattan as your brother. Of course I'll help you. For the first time in months, my sister smiled genuinely. As we organized the documents to take to my lawyer, my cell phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Hello. Leo Richardson? The voice was hesitant, feminine. Yes. My name is Sarah Mitchell. I saw Bradley Hutchinson's name in your background check through mutual contacts. Do you know him? I looked at Jessica, who was listening to the conversation. I did. Why? Because he just called me, saying he needed a place to stay. And I wanted to let you know that whoever he's trying to fool now, they need to know who he really is. I smiled. Brad had made his last mistake, trying to go back to an ex-victim who already knew his game. Sarah, I said, thank you so much for calling. But you don't need to worry. Brad's problem has just been permanently solved. Because some men never learn. And when they don't learn, the whole world becomes their classroom. 3 weeks later, I received a call from Jessica in the middle of an executive meeting. Leo, you won't believe what happened. I excused myself from the Japanese investors and left the conference room. Tell me. Brad got fired. The company found out he had been inflating sales figures for months. And there's more. 2 ex-girlfriends came forward after Sarah posted about him on Facebook. They created a group to warn other women. I smiled, looking out the window on the 42nd floor. And how are you feeling? Free, she said simply. For the first time in months, free. That weekend, Jessica showed up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and a confession. Leo, I always knew you were special. Ever since you were a child, you saw things I ignored. But Brad convinced me that it was arrogance. It was never arrogance, Jess. It was protection. I know that now. 2 weeks before Christmas, my mother called me in tears. Leo, I'm sorry I believed him. I should have trusted you. Mom, you were protecting Jessica. I understand. No, I was running away from conflict. And I almost lost my son because of it. On Christmas Eve, I drove to my mother's house carrying gifts and a sense of completeness I hadn't felt in years. When I walked in, Jessica ran to hug me. You saved my life, she whispered. Literally. During dinner, my Uncle William, a retired accountant, asked a question that everyone wanted to ask but no one had the courage to. Leo, what do you really do for a living? I smiled, carving the turkey. I manage investments. I analyze risks. I protect assets. How big? Asked my cousin Rachel. Big enough that you'll never have to worry about whether I can hold a conversation about money again. Everyone laughed, but it was a different kind of laugh. Respectful. Real. After dinner, Jessica and I washed the dishes together like we used to when we were kids. Leo, can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you ever tell us who you really were? I dried a plate slowly, thinking about my answer. Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not for what I have. What about Brad? Brad judged me for who he thought I was. And he paid the price for underestimating the wrong person. That night, when everyone went to bed, I stood on the porch of my mother's house looking at the stars. My cell phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Leo. The voice was broken, desperate. Brad. What do you want? I lost everything. My job, my house, even my family rejected me when they found out the truth. So. You won, okay? You proved your point. Brad, I said calmly, I didn't prove anything. You destroyed yourself. I just documented the process. For God's sake, give me a chance. I can change. You had chances with 7 different women. And you wasted them all. I hung up the phone and blocked the number. The next day, during breakfast, my mother served me pancakes and said, "Son, tell me about your work." Really this time. I spent the entire morning explaining investments, real estate, urban development. She listened with fascination, asking intelligent questions that reminded me where I had inherited my curiosity. Why did you hide this from us? She finally asked. Because you never really asked. You asked in a way that expected a simple answer. Jessica, who was listening from the living room, came into the kitchen. What if we had really asked? I would have told you everything. Always. At that moment, I realized that the real revenge had not been Brad's downfall. It had been the recovery of my family. The return of trust. The end of assumptions. If you've made it this far in this story of family manipulation and reversal, subscribe to the channel because there are people who try to diminish us just to feel bigger, and these stories show that the truth always wins. 3 years later, Jessica remarried, this time to a math teacher she met in a personal finance course I paid for her. At the party, she made a toast calling me the best brother and best financial advisor in the world. Brad. I heard he was working in telemarketing in another city, still trying to convince women he was successful on Tinder. As for me, I learned that protecting your family isn't about controlling their choices, it's about being there when they need someone to help them see the truth. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply to be who you've always been, and let the liars get tangled up in their own traps.